Hey, good afternoon. 4:30 here on the west coast of Canada, and I'm just trying to finish up a little bit of work before I get started on dinner. And but I had an interesting experience when I was out, and the experience was I'm just working here as I chat. I went out grocery shopping. And that by itself is not very interesting, is it? What was interesting is my my response, meaning how I was experiencing being out in public. And I think today it was probably the worst. My well, how to put it? It's I know we've developed where there's a bit of fatigue. There's a bit of fatigue that's that people are experiencing because of the insanity in the world right now. But it's almost a level of intolerance to the environment, like being out in public. It's I felt claustrophobic for being kind of locked in all year. And now when I go out, actually, I find myself becoming irritated. And I'm trying to kind of piece through it, because you're going to have a reaction, have an emotional reaction. But you don't really know what it is until you actually sit with it for a little bit and sit with it and try to understand it. And I think part of it comes through being in healthcare for 25 years, and realizing that it's the success rate of people changing their lifestyle is very low, right? I think we have I think the failure rate is around 87%. 87% of the people will fail to drastically alter their lifestyle enough to make a significant difference in their health and their health status. And when I look at money spent on lifestyle-related diseases, it's in the trillions, right? Like the amount of money spent through the healthcare system or the disease management industry. We have to stop calling it the healthcare system and start calling it what it is: a disease management system and business model, right? So the disease management system, there's trillions of dollars that are spent on preventable lifestyle diseases, like trillions of dollars spent every year. The amount of money that's spent, and there's always a lot of discussion around senior care and elder care, and how much money is spent on seniors. Developing again a lot of the end of life crises that seniors seem to be afflicted with. How many of those can be actually averted by changes in the lifestyle prior? By better quality of food, by more exercise, by where do you intervene to stop the cascade? And I did a little experiment, thought experiment, about a week ago, and this was actually inspired by Dr. Jordan Peterson. When he was studying the 20th century, when he was going to university, he was doing political studies, and he was very interested in the 20th century. And so what he was interested in is that he's looked at, reading through around what was going on in Russia during the time of Stalin, what was going on in Germany with Hitler and the Nazi regime, what was going on in Maoist China. And what was interesting is that it's, there's an eerie resemblance to what's going on in the world. People turning in their neighbors, right? People turning against each other. People becoming informants on their neighbor. Very, very like what you saw in the communist countries, right? Historically and perhaps even currently. So that was kind of frightening to watch, to see that that exists. People are people are willing to turn each other in, right? So it's neighbor against neighbor. But also looking at the negligible effect that we look at we'll call it a theoretical pandemic, Because there's no doubt that people are sick, and there's no doubt people that die. That's not the question. But because there's so much conflict and changing narratives around it, you can only assume that it's not what it is, because it was fairly straightforward, like any virus or any flu, like Ebola, or there's nothing else that's ever actually had this kind of uncertainty. Watching doctors getting removed from their jobs because they're looking, saying the hospitals aren't overcrowded, and we think what you're doing is wrong. And even the World Health Organization has said numerous times that, you know, the closing everything down is not necessary and it's not working. But the media is, you know, it's just, we're in this vacuum, this information vacuum. So what was frustrating? So again, I'm in the health industry, and I'm trying to work my way through this information that we're living in, and then again, when I just got sidetracked off, when the whole point of this whole communist conversation was what Jordan Peterson and what he was interested in. He said, you know, how could people be like that? How could people be a prison guard at Auschwitz, like the chappies? They're called chappies, and chappies were guards, but they were actually prisoners that were given command over the different barracks. And the chappies, like fellow Jews and fellow prisoners, were more violent, more sadistic than the actual Nazi guards, right? So what Jordan Peterson was interested in is that how, you know, not why did they do that, but how did they do that? Like, what would it take for me to be that person? And he said, and it doesn't take very long. It wouldn't take very long before, if you think it out and you spend some time with it, to realize how you, the good person you are, could be a chappie, could be a violent prison guard, or it could be the person turning in their neighbor because you're out of fear and self-preservation. And it's not too hard to see. So I think I understand that, and that's a really important recognition. The other thing, the reason why I was going through that process, I was wondering, so if I was the richest 5 people on the entire planet, and I looked at the planet strictly economically, right? There's nothing about morality, nothing about humanity. Just take morality and humanity off the table just for a second, and say, so what would it look? So what is a good investment? Are humans a good investment? Well, as a labor force, yeah, perhaps, right? Good investment as a labor force, because you need labor. AI is certainly helping, you know, wean the need for humans out of the equation. Okay, so is the healthcare system a good investment? Well, depends who you're talking to, right? So if we keep letting things go the way they go, and we keep this infighting, and we don't see any inroads put into, you know, if we say this is strictly a health issue, which I don't believe it is, but let's just call it just a health issue. If this is really a health issue, then why wouldn't there be steps to be, you know, and if there was a high level of morality within our government, that there was any level of morality within the disease management business, aka the healthcare system, if there's any level of morality involved in both the powers that be, then we would find ways to ensure that over, let's say, a 5 to 10 year period of time, that cigarettes would no longer be allowed to be sold anywhere. That we would start weaning out junk food, right? You know, pop and these things, like the junk food, candies, all these things would slowly be weaned out 5 to 10 year period to completely eradicate them from the shelves in a store. We would change the laws around medical care, so that if you have a lifestyle created disorder, you're given a certain amount of grace period to actually to alter your behavior enough so that you come under acceptable parameters, what is considered, let's say, good to fair health. You know, because if I was drunk driving my vehicle and I kept banging it up, my insurance would go through the ceiling. But under the disease management system, it's self-serving, so I can be as unhealthy as I want, not change anything, and still have access to healthcare. And we think that's an inalienable right, and I don't think it is, because it should be. It's a privilege, and But none of my other insurance policies operate like a disease management policy, or sorry, healthcare policy. So from a business point of view, humanity is not a good investment, except as a labor force. And it's kind of what communist countries, how communist countries view their people, right? As not really a great investment other than a labor force. And we can always chew you up and there's somebody else to come in to take your job. And that's kind of what we kind of see the environment that we're now watching unfold in front of us, right? So we're people that are self-employed. We're destroying their businesses by not allowing them to operate. We're not allowing people to congregate, so we can't even have these discussions, right? Don't let people congregate. Keep them afraid, and again, and what we see out there isn't as the world's not coming to an end the way it's constantly being broadcasted. There wouldn't be so many doctors and nurses and scientists being silenced, being fired, if there's something wasn't amiss, because this has never happened before at this level, right? So you got to kind of scratch your head. So with knowing all this stuff and realizing that that what we're not doing, and we're gonna pay dearly for this. I mean, as a citizen, we're gonna pay dearly for this, for our submissiveness, for our inability to right our own ship when it comes to our own health, for the inability to be to have a long view about how things are playing out. I mean, we should be terrified for our children and our children's children if we just sit back and do nothing. And what can you do? Well, you can decide that you can take one thing, let's say one thing a month, and you'll start cleaning it up. And that one thing could be, let's say it's your lifestyle. And so what is one part of your lifestyle that you can work on? Yes, of course, right? What's one thing that you can work on every month for this entire year? By the time of the end of the year, you've changed 12 habits, right? Or 11, because it's February coming up. If you could change one thing a month, work on one thing a month, just one thing every 30 days, you would be an entirely different human being by the end of the year, right? The things that you need to work on. But the challenge is that we don't sit down and think about it. We don't think about the responsibility that we have, So my responsibility in my life isn't just to me, because I'm not a solitary creature. I'm connected to people. I have children, right? I have family. So I'm connected to all these individuals. So everything I do, all my behavior has a systemic effect. It means my behavior just ripples out and it affects everyone connected to me, right? And so my thought process when I go through life, and it's not a perfect equation, for sure, but my thought process when I go through life is trying to imagine that, if I choose this behavior, is it also good? Is it also good for you, right? Is it good for my children? Does it support the greater good? Because I'm a part of an ecosystem, right? And an ecosystem it collaborates, and in order for an ecosystem to work, all parts have to be healthy. And the way all parts are healthy is that they're fully self-expressed, which means I need to be fully self-expressed financially, which means I have to, be really sensible and think about how I spend my money, my finances, and what level of debt is acceptable. I have to think about my personal health. If I don't look after my health, I become somebody else's dependent, and I'm no longer able to function, right? So that's ridiculous, right? So I have to be responsible for my own health, regardless of the reason of why I got thrown off course, and work my way back, and realize, because it's not just about me, it's about my children, right? It's about my family, about people I'm connected to. So I'm responsible not only for my own health, but I'm responsible for how my either good health or lack of health actually affects the people that are connected to me. And we can't be blind to realize that it doesn't on either end. And it's so interesting. But I was going to the grocery store and I was getting angrier and angrier with the mask, and just And I don't know, it just doesn't seem to raise an alarm. Doesn't seem to make anybody afraid. It terrifies me. This whole thing, COVID, I don't give a shit about COVID, right? That doesn't scare me at all. What's happened, the submissiveness of society scares me to death. It really does. It makes me terrified for the future of my children. You know, I'm 56, so, you know, I might cruise along till 96 being a pain in the ass to everyone, but it's my children, it's my children's children, it's my great-great-grandchildren, you know. Historically, and maybe not too long ago, when we thought about our lives, we always thought about, you know, what I'm doing now what's the impact 7 generations from now? Right? We don't think that way anymore. We don't think past the end of the week, right? And I'm being vague, and I'm not trying to be provocative, but society as a whole does not see past, you know, like the end of the week. Because if we did, we'd all be terrified right now. But we can't let it happen. We got here, right? Distracted, regardless of, you know, the powers that be, and we can blame the political agenda, which I'm sure there's a very powerful one at play, but there's 7 billion of us, and maybe how many of them? And if I was a politician and a gazillionaire and looking at the planet, I would think that the average person is not a good investment financially, because it costs too much to keep people alive. And if not functioning, so it's much easier just to say, listen, you know, you tried, you know, your business failing, right? Healthcare is costing trillions of dollars to keep people alive that don't want to, that are not really fighting for their own health. You know, and it's not an accusation. I get it, man. It's just, you know, I smoked for 15 years. I was a drug user for that period of time. I drank heavily. Like, I get it. It's you know, it's tough. It's a challenging road when you have to right your own ship. But it's you know, so it just, you know, I'm speaking from a point of experience where I understand the path. But man, if we have children, and if we want to have children, and we look at the future, you know, if you're not terrified of what's happening, then you're asleep, man. I don't know. But I left the store. I couldn't be in the store any longer. I was just getting so angry. And people walk around like this shit's normal, right? Yeah. Again, I'm not discounting the fact that there's an illness, and I'm not minimizing the lives that are lost. That's not the point. The point is, we're becoming submissive enough that this is becoming okay, and nobody's questioning it. The fact that Trudeau and the rest of them are just simply, you know, there's no forum in which the opposite side of the conversation is allowed to be heard by scientists and professionals and lawyers. Like, there's lawsuits everywhere, especially in Europe, lawsuits everywhere going against different health organizations, against politicians, lawsuits everywhere. But at the end of the day, we can't let them do that. Like, they can't be the only ones, just a few people in the world that deciding that they're going to stand up and fight, be the lawyers or doctors. We, the people, right? We, the individuals, the 7 billion of us. You know, if we don't start sharing a common narrative, we'll get what we get, because that's what we created. Well, it is, yeah. But, you know, again, yeah, you're right, Jamie. I mean, but if you take a long view, right? If you take a long view and say, where will we be by the end of the year? And then we have to question authority to some degree, because otherwise we're just sheep. But we've had a year into this process, a year and a bit. Well, just over a year roughly, right? And the fact that people are still being fired from their jobs in healthcare for having an opinion, fired from them saying that this isn't right. The fact that they won't release the real numbers around COVID-19. They won't release the real numbers, right? So again, and my good friend of mine is a doctor, and he says, well, there was 600 cases. I don't care how many cases there were. What I'm interested in is what's the mortality rate. I want a real number, and the real number is how many people got sick and how many people recovered and how many people died. That's the moral conversation to have, and they refuse to do that, which tells you what. I guess the only reason there's a conspiracy theory around this is that it's the silencing of people in science and people in healthcare, the silencing of them, the arrest of protesters who are coming up with showing all this evidence that's all around the world, and the fact that social media disregards will not allow it to be shown. Right, it's like a giant gag order in the world. But anyhow, so my job is to make sure the health of my children and the people that I work with, and the people that I connected with, and myself, is look after it, right? And one way to look after myself, and for me, it's my mental health, is to have these conversations and ask you, what is one thing that you can do this month that is something that if you let whatever, let's say you have one behavior, let's say you got a couple behaviors that are not the greatest, but if you're honest with yourself, if you take it out of the fog so you can see the thing clearly, and you scale it forward 5 years. If you keep doing that thing that you're doing, where will you be in 5 years? And what will be the cost? And once a month, take something out of your bag of tricks, out of your less than stellar behavior, because we all have things, right? And what would that look like? And if you scale it forward 5 years, if you don't change anything in your behavior, where will you be in 5 years? And more importantly, what is the effect to those people intimately connected to you? What is the cost to them, not just to you? But conversely, what if you change one thing, maybe the big thing, and you scale it forward 5 years, and you have mastered it over 5 years? What does your life look like then? And how the people intimately connected to you, what's their life like? Something we have to think about, and our forefathers used to think this way, right? 7 generations. But if we're not doing our best to become healthy, personally healthy, emotionally healthy, financially healthy, if we're not really digging into that and making that a priority, then anything that operates outside of the whole, health-wise, is classified as a rogue cell, right? And it becomes cancerous. And if our lifestyle isn't pro-health, right? So if we're not doing whatever we can to stay as healthy as possible, to stay out of the hospitals, to have almost no need for a doctor whatsoever, almost no need for medications unless it's something we were born with, or like through lung transplants, that sort of thing, anti-rejection medicine. Do everything in our power to take preventable diseases and slowly start eradicating the behaviors that are causing them. What would this world look like? And I assure you, we wouldn't be here right now if that was the case. And again, it's not blaming people, because the world's insane. I'm just saying and I think that's a challenging part. You got to separate it, right? We have to separate the part around personal responsibility and personal fault. Because people get up in arms and say, well, you're being a bit of a dick, right? It's just, you don't have my weight issues. I have all these challenges, and these, I'm a single mom, and I can barely afford to do this, and I don't have the money for this, and we understand all the challenges that are there because we've all been through them. I've lived on the street, right? I've lived through chaotic upbringings around alcoholism and drug addiction, and I get it. I've been on welfare, right? I've slept in a Salvation Army box. I get it. I know both sides of the coin, so I'm not just speaking as somebody who's never experienced hardship. But I'm afraid for us. And you should too.